This is Special Report.
Black holes are one of the strangest things in existence.
Neil Armstrong may have seen extraterrestrials on the moon.
When he spies a discernible shape.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there. And no one, no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Welcome to another episode of Full Spectrum Universe. My name is Rob Yox. What an epic show we have for you tonight. It is the Friday night fight. We are up against the adversary. We're not going to stop. And just as we said in the intro, no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth. What they try to do is whitewash media. They try to whitewash history. We are the defenders of that truth, and we're here to bring you more of it today, each and every day. So just to give you guys a quick update on what's going on and what's coming up down the pipeline really quickly before we start. Tonight, we have Stephen and Evan Strong and Teejay Casado. It's going to be an epic conversation. We're all going to be involved. We're going to let everybody riff a little bit and give their information and promote Our Alien Ancestry's next chapter. And, I just wanted to get out beforehand that on the 1st of next month, me and Joan of Angels are going to be putting together a string of shows based on Tartaria, what it was, what it means, and how it's affected today. So first, I'm going to bring in Stephen and Evan Strong, my good friends, my brothers from other mothers. What's going on? How are you?
I don't know about other mother, but yeah, good. Thank you, Rob. And Evan's around somewhere. He just got here a minute ago, but he's bouncing around. He'll be here. Oh, there he is.
I was going to say maybe he's gelling his hair because he saw mine in the back, and we're always in competition to see who's got the best do. Of course, he always wins, but it is what it is. So, guys, give us a hint of what's coming up on the next Our Alien Ancestry Conference you guys have coming up.
Yeah, there's a few things. Look, what we're trying to do, as you know, we always focus around this change that's coming in the future, and we particularly were focusing in on, we're going to be spending some time talking about the Hopi referred to the old teachings, in particular the belief they have that if you don't understand the old teachings, you won't be welcome. So this time round, we're going overseas. The next one, we've got all original elders again, but this time we're sort of going overseas, and we've got TJ. We'll be around sometime, I'm thinking. Evan, what are you doing?
I'm adjusting the lighting. We're coming in a little bit hot.
Oh. No, your microphone. It's the microphone. It's coming in strong, not the lights.
Oh, right. Sorry, I thought it was the lights. He was down on his knees next to me. I'm wondering what's going on here.
Yeah,
okay.
That's where the switch is.
Yeah, we're gonna look at it from a different point of view, and what we're going to do is we're going to do it two ways. TJ is going to be talking about ancient civilizations, in particular focusing on Atlantis, isn't she?
Yeah.
With Dr. Carmen Buta, and they're going to do some work together on that. And then we've brought back Paul and Phoebe, who are going to do overseas in a completely different way, which is a more personal, introspective way, because they're on a spiritual quest. So
they've travelled the world.
Yeah, and they did that for about 15 years, and we did some of it before, but only halfway through. So we're going to add to that. So we're going to do that. I was originally going to do original magic, and I was really keen to do that, but Evan stepped in and banned it.
I did. I started looking at some of the sites, artifacts, the little tidbits here in Australia. But going with the theme of overseas ways, I've looked at people that have visited Australia in the past, ancient mariners from other cultures. I've spent probably 30 hours collating all of that.
So therefore I had to do it, otherwise you would have
lost out. So if I worked too hard on it, that's what we're going to talk about now.
And what's interesting in that one, Rob, is there's one part of it which I want to talk about now, is the two skulls that were found by Mainstream in Australia. And by the way, they were found by the police. And I find it fascinating, the story behind those two ones, and I do want to share that with you. It gives you an idea how Mainstream are programmed to respond to things, even when they come up with ridiculous statements. They are just locked into thinking the wrong way. Now, it goes like this. About 8-9 years ago, a skull was found by the police in Sydney at a place called Mona Vale, wasn't it?
Yes.
And it came out during the flood. And they said, my God, first of all, the first thing they said was the skull is about, they said originally about 700 years old. But they've now redated it at around 1,000 years old. Now, the skull is of a child between 5 to 6 and is European. It's not Australian. Now, we have a problem with that because originally, when it was around about, they thought it was 1300. The problem is this, you probably know this yourself, Rob, but when colonialism took place from Europe, they left Europe at around 1400.
Yeah,
right?
1400s kind of went
And
dark.
started sailing around the world and stealing all the other countries and creating chaos that we're still dealing with today. And they were off with good intentions, of course, and they just basically wanted to steal what they could blind everywhere. But they started around 1400. And this young 5 to 6 year old girl, not from Australia, is found around 1300, but we've since redated that.
Yeah, they then found the jaw.
The jaw, yeah, they found the jaw that went with it, and they redated it now to 1000 AD. Now, we had a problem, because 1000 AD, all the history books tell you that no one was moving to Australia, no one was wandering around anywhere. They weren't going to Africa, they weren't sailing anywhere. And secondly, if they were sailing, what the hell is a 5-year-old kid doing on the boat? A girl. Yeah. There's a law in they used to think it was bad luck to sail with a woman on a boat, right? That's the yeah. So we've got
have the horseshoes too. You'd have to everybody touch the horseshoe, and they just do all types of superstitions.
All sorts of stuff, mate. But that was around 1400, so this is 400 years before. But don't worry, the Australian scientists and government came up with an obvious excuse, an obvious story. The story was that this child that they found was actually part of a collection that people who collect skulls, and of course, as you know, it's very popular around the world. Everyone collects live skulls with the bones and stuff. It's quite a normal thing to do. And they said it was a collector, but he dropped it, or she dropped it. We don't know if it was a male or female. They weren't that specific. And what Mona Vale police said was this, and it's on the news release. If you want the skull, give us a ring. Come around and pick it up, because we don't want it and we don't know what it is. So it was decided by experts that it was actually just a careless collector. And as you can imagine, as you're walking through the bush with the skull in your hand, as you would, because that's what you do when you collect.
Yeah, you just walk around with a skull.
Yeah, like that, looking at it, and all of a sudden you bump into something and you drop it.
Oh, yeah.
And then what you do is you forget that you drop it and you walk on and you leave it. That seems pretty obvious.
Keeping in mind, it probably, would be expensive.
Well, they would have been, yeah, but I mean, yeah. Well, then you're a collector, man. You've got plenty of money. You just get another one. Oh, he did find another one. That's right. They found another skull, this time in Taree. Right? Again, found by the police. Got to make this point, and they thought it was a murder scene, didn't they, Evan?
That's kind of strange. There seems to be this, the police bringing it forward when we know that there are definitely actors out there who portray to bring things to light at specific times that we know it's kind of manufactured, right?
Well, these ones came out. The difference with these two is they both came out during floods, right? And I think what's happened, mate, is they've been washed from somewhere else and come down the river, because both of them were found floating, right? The one from Taree from a flood, the one from Sydney for a flood. And this one was found this year. And with this one, it was dated. And this time they came up with a date of a very specific one, carbon-14, which they believe in a lot. It does have flaws, but they don't want to talk about that. They came up with a date of around 1500. Now that's okay this time because that time it could fit. Hang on, no, it couldn't
no, that's
fit
the
in.
jawbone. Oh wait, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is there. Right. It came up around 1500, and that means it could have been, it's not Cook, it could have been Spanish, but Tari, interesting, and it was found by the police again. But straight away, as soon as the experts were called in, they said to us straight away, collector. That's the collector's one again. But this...
They just drop it and walk away, like, not that it doesn't like screw any collection that they have, or
fine, mate. It's just look, if it's a 1,000-old skull, I'll just get another one from a 5 to 6 year old kid. And they did. This is Devon's got up the story before when they dated between 12 to 1400. Now it's dated to 1,000. It's belonged to a boy, right? But it's not original. So we don't know how it got there, and they're guessing. And the second one is European. This one they're not sure about. But both of them have been definitely recognised as not being original. And this one, again, was dropped by a collector. The guy there, the police there are actually saying the same thing. Oh, it must be a collector. What we've got to remember is this collector is in Taree, not in Sydney. Now, that's about 300 k's away. Now, what I love about this is both entertain for a second the fact that, maybe it could be from somewhere, but then they quickly dismiss it and say, well, that'd be ridiculous. And the reason they say it's ridiculous is because no whitefellas were here before Cook. So therefore, whatever they find, no matter how many skulls they found, and by the way, it's not just skulls. There's plenty of coins found around here, and every coin that's been found, they'll always say the same thing. It's a collector, and they dropped it.
Oh my God.
I love the way these collectors, like there's a Ptolemy coin that was found near Cairns, and they spoke about the fact, and it was found in 1900. And what's really fascinating about this, in the article there, it will tell you that nobody was up there. No one went near Cairns until about 1876. And he found it in 1900. So there's a 24-year gap, right? And what they said was, that would have been carried by gold miners. And they said gold miners often carry little tokens like that of ancient Egyptian coins. That's what a gold miner would do, Evan, wouldn't they? I mean...
Well, a logical mind would say if they've got a nice collection of Ptolemy coins,
they wouldn't be digging. They would have had the money. If they're buying the Ptolemy coins, man, I'm wondering what in the hell are they doing? First time anyone's been out in this place. It's the first time a white fella's been there in 1870.
And somehow, not only that, they managed to get 7 centimeters of dirt.
That's the best part. This is the best part.
Oh.
This coin,
and then dirt was all over it. Just
yes, they admit that. They admit that because the guy that found it didn't find it. He was digging fence post on an Aboriginal walking track. They say it was on an Aboriginal walking track, and then they say, he was digging, and he had to dig down 7 centimeters, which is about 3 inches, before he found it. But here's the problem: in the article, they tell us that whitefellas first turned up there in 1876. He's dug it out 24 years later, and 7 centimeters of dirt has already laid above it during that period of time. That is actually impossible. There's a rule about how you measure how much dirt's on top of an artifact to get an age. All right? And I can tell you, it doesn't go every 20 years at 7 centimeters. It doesn't work like that. It's just not on. But what we find, and what Evan found, because he's the one who's making me doing this, is everything that's found, and there's plenty. There are coins found all over, and every coin is down to a very clumsy, awkward, forgetful collector that just keeps dropping stuff all over the country. Some say it could be a plant. I know they said with the Piltdown skull it was a plant. Maybe this is a plant. And I'm thinking, well, if it is a plant, where's the point?
Maybe he's leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for you guys. Maybe that's what it is. And listen, if that's the breadcrumb, I can't wait to see what the pot of gold is at the end of that rainbow. Let me tell you, you're going to walk into a cave and it's going to be absolutely crazy.
See, what Evan was looking for primarily was artifacts that we can identify being from somewhere else in the world.
That shouldn't be here.
That shouldn't be here. I mean, and it's fascinating in Australia. I mean, we're not going to mention the fact we found 2 rings at Carryong, and one, it's not at Carryong, at Hill End, and one was 4.5 metres beneath the surface, and one was 1.5 metres beneath the surface. How are we going to say that one was a collector? Think about that for a sec.
They dug a hole, and then they dropped it, and then they walked away after filling the hole back in.
Yeah, for what reason, we don't know, but then they walked away and they did that and left it there. It's sort of fascinating now that what we find in Australia is this stuff is being found all over. And it's interesting, I remember on one occasion, another set of coins were found there. They're Egyptian coins again, and the people say on that particular site, the archaeologist said, well, the Aboriginal people don't have any stories about Egyptians there, so it can't be Egyptian.
We know that's not true.
Well, it's not true, but what's interesting, in another article I'm going to read out, in that article, all the Aboriginal people say it was Egyptian, and then the archaeologist ignored it and said, oh, well, I don't know what they're talking about. And I'm thinking, oh, man, you can't win here. If you don't tell the archaeologist that we've got Egyptian stories, they say, well, there's none there because I didn't hear it. If they do tell them, and in another article I'm going to talk about on the day, they specifically say, oh, yeah, Egyptians were here, and they say, well, that can't be right. So you can't really win here. So what we're looking at is the highlights of archaeology in Australia and how they've been conditioned to have one narrative of no matter what turns up, and Evan's found about 30 different objects. And we go through each one of them, and whether it's boats, and of course, here's a great story. There's a place at Stradbroke Island, which is off the mainland of Australia. And everybody knows there's a Spanish boat there, right? Yep. And of course, the original people say, oh, yeah, the Spanish were here. And of course, the archaeology...
Not only that, some of the Aboriginal families there say, we're also Spanish.
And here's the best part. They admit that when the whitefellas first got there, the original people was buying everything with Spanish coins, and they admit that. They say
the Spanish doubloons and coins.
Yeah, they said for quite some time, everyone from Stradbroke Island, they go and buy things, and they just bring in all these Spanish gold coins. I said, shit, yeah, man, we'll take it. What do you want? Buy us out. And that's in the article. So I swear to you, it's in the article. I was reading this article, and I read that part, and I thought, I can't read this anymore. It's making me ill. Because
that's bad.
First of all, they say they didn't mention it. And when they do, they say, well, they're wrong. And when they bring Spanish doubloons and they admit that they brought them to the shops, and they said for years, for decades, they never brought Australian money, right? They kept bringing in Spanish doubloons from Stradbroke Island. And now they also say, yeah, we got them off the wrecked ship. That all makes sense, doesn't it? Everything makes sense because it admitted in the article that they brought this in. But the archaeologists still managed to dismiss that. I've got to tell you, the person around Australia who's been planting these things, God almighty, these were gold placed, but it's Spanish, it's Portuguese, it's Egyptian. They drop everything here.
Chinese.
Oh, Chinese, yeah, we got that. Yeah.
African.
Yep. Oh, that's right, African. Yeah, I forgot that. But
there's got to be a pile of every lost left sock somewhere. You know, every sock that the wash ate is there in Australia.
Australia. It seems to be. It's actually, I looked at it for a while and I started laughing after a while because I kept thinking, but mate, in the article before you said that's not good enough.
Oh, French as well. But,
that's right. French lead weights, yeah.
From 1235.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. Yeah, French were lead weights there from 1235. It was found to 1400. But the point is, between 1235 and 1400, nobody from France or Spain, and this is what's been dated, nobody from those areas was wandering anywhere. So what Australia is, when you look at it from an archaeological viewpoint, it's chaos for mainstream.
Yeah.
And we're making up lies. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be reading from papers from archaeologists. And in one part of this, Evan's going to be the archaeologist, and he's going to be reading these, and I'll be the person who's saying, hang on for a sec, that don't make sense. And we'll do that quite a few times to show people how ridiculous mainstream has become. It's funny, it's not just in archaeology now. Mainstream's become ridiculous in everything they nearly say, but we focus on that area. So, yeah, we'll be doing that. Yeah, and we've got a guy there called Lawrence Hargraves, right? And he talks about carvings that were found that come from the Santa Maria, the Columbus ship from 1492. And people might think, oh, what does that mean? Lawrence Hargraves is actually one of the most famous people in Australia.
He's on some of our money.
His face is on the $10 bill. And he swore, he said, I found, and he's got big stories about the fact the Spanish were in Botany Bay in 1522. And it's quite well known. The capitals on beside the ship were BALN. It goes on to say on line 1 below is ZAIH. The whole thing, he wrote this up. And he was the one who saw it. And you know what? Even though he's on the $10 note, they ignore him anyway. So it doesn't matter who finds it. It doesn't matter if your name ends up on a piece of currency, man. If you say the wrong thing, it will be ignored. He found ring bolts that were bolted into the solid rock. And he said, oh, this is ridiculous. The Aboriginal people don't do this. Well, they did, but they didn't know about this. And then he actually and we got the map up, and we've even got his drawings of what he's found there. And by the way, if you go to the headland at this place near Botany Bay, it's still there. But no one goes there. Oh, yeah, it's still there today. We've got a picture of it. Yep. Yeah, it's still there. And it's actually engraved in there on the side, and it overlooks the ocean. And it's got all the name, it's written in Spanish, and the whole thing's done there. And Hargraves could speak Spanish. He said, my God, this is what we found. So, yeah, we're going to be doing interesting archaeology, and then TJ and Paul and Phoebe will look at overseas stories that relate to this. And we'll also this is not overseas. Our interview with Mesrev this time was based around one place. Well, Carmen Bolter and TJ are doing Atlantis, aren't they? So we're going to do Lemuria.
That's incredible. That's incredible. We actually have TJ backstage. I want to bring her on. But before I do, I want to read her bio really quickly. So Teejay Casado worked as a field archaeologist for more than a decade with Native American groups, salvaged and mitigated cultural heritage impacts from urban and industrial development. She studied archaeology in Melbourne's La Trobe University, conducted special research on exotic artifacts from the Neolithic settlements in the Dead Sea Plain of 9,000 years ago. Her training in spotting what doesn't quite fit naturally had her diving into the throes of forbidden and anomalous archaeology. Amazing. I can't wait to talk to TJ too. In 2010, she became involved in a documentary project, Ancient Tomorrow, taking a close look at the ancient pyramid sites from around the world and looking at the possibilities of pyramids as ancient energy amplifiers or power plants and connecting the dots all the way to Nikola Tesla's wireless energy technology, secret experiments before he died. She is an avid archaeological consultant for Stephen and Evan Strong, one of the few archaeologists gamed and interpreted enough to question the mainstream historical narrative. So without further ado, let's bring in TJ. TJ, how are you?
Hi, I'm really well. Can you guys hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, good, because I was having a bit of tech issues, but just give me a heads up if it starts doing anything weird.
You got it. Absolutely. And, one of the first things I wanted to jump on, like right out of the window at is, Stephen and Evan, they always do amazing work. And one of the things that they've done with you here is to kind of bring in that archaeological side with the spiritual side. So it's like a full combination at this conference, and you get both sides of the pendulum, which is super important. So, tell us a little bit about what you will be talking about during the conference.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me on. And again, lots of gratitude to you, Stephen and Evan, for making me a part of it, and Rob for having me on to share with your audience. I'm really excited about it. So yeah, I'm going to be speaking this weekend with the Our Alien Ancestry Conference, primarily about my close relationship for a period of time with Dr. Carmen Bolter, who is the executive producer and creator of the Pyramid Code series. It's a documentary series your audience and yourself might have heard about. And I think it was really it is really groundbreaking as far as helping to really cast a light on a different narrative about ancient Egypt that is not really given much of a spotlight, and it's also done in such a way that I think is highly credible and really allows space for the different disciplines to contribute what they believe was really going on based on the archaeological record, as well as based on current experts who are doing experiments and studies on the technological aspect and engineering that would have had to go into the construction of what we see in ancient Egypt, especially really going far back into the pre-dynastic time. So Carmen Bolter produced this documentary pretty much on her own back. And before I continue, I want to give mad love and respect to her. She passed away unexpectedly this year, and it was really a great blow to myself and many of those who really treasure her work, her personality. She was such a loving, compassionate woman as well. I think she was also a great proponent for the return of the divine feminine. She wrote a book called Angels and Archetypes that kind of puts a focus and spotlight on how the feminine intelligence and the sacred feminine has been marginalized throughout the ages. And it goes so far back. I mean, we're talking about into even before pre-dynastic Egypt, and there's clues at how this is also part of the origins of a lot of the root to the problems we face today that seems to be at the hands of a controlling elite that is kind of in the shadows and in the backgrounds of the world leaders that we might see that are really just figureheads. So I really want to honor her work, and I'm so grateful that I'm given a chance to do so. She and I worked closely for a period of time because I reached out to her as part of my research for my documentary, and then she was really keen to work with someone who, like myself, who was like willing to look into these things, but coming from the field of archaeology. At the time, I was a busy archaeologist working like in the mainstream field, not as an academic, more like they call us shovel bums. We're like paid, a hired shovel digger, and we go from job to job. And I love this job. Like, I love doing this so much, but it was also very you kind of had to, it was a fine line of like doing it for the love and the ethics of the science, and at the same time being paid by the destructors. So you would be paid by the mining company, or you'd be paid by the pipeline company. And so it got to, personally for me in my journey, it got to a point where I was worn out by it, because there's a lot of politics and a lot of hypocrisy, and just even infighting within, different groups and agencies that are supposed to be protecting cultural heritage and human remains. So when I took a step back from that, I started like helping her out for the next sort of like the part 2 to the Pyramid Code. So so yeah, I'll be speaking about what we did. She wanted me to help her in her research for the part 2 series, which was actually going to be at the time called The New Atlantis. And it was very exciting work for me because like it was really the next stage. It was really the next like what's next, now that we know that ancient Egypt is not like what our history books, our textbooks, like I fell in love with history in Egypt, like, most kids when they're younger. Oh, excuse me.
That's
My
okay.
little one just walked in. But yeah. Hold on, let me shut the door. Poppy's gonna come get you. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, so it was like the next installment, and she brought on a group of really amazing experts. Unfortunately, we lost touch like during the pandemic and all the lockdowns. She moved from Vancouver. She's Canadian, and she moved from Vancouver to Spain, and she was retired, and but was still working on it. And then and yeah, unfortunately, was a bit tight-lipped about what she was up to. And then we just heard that she'd passed away. I'm in the process of getting together with some of her team that she was also other people that she was working with to see if there's something we can do to keep her legacy going and her work going. But just a little bit about the Atlantis investigation. So one of the things that was really great is that she had actually access to a secret vault in a Vatican library. And you know what? It's not so secret anymore. If you really look this up, there's been much publicity about it in recent years. And we all know a lot, many of us, and without going into conspiracy theories, have some idea about what's really going on in the Vatican and also how much power they really hold and yield over the world and over governing bodies, let's say. And anyway, so there's this secret library or secret vault, and she had some access to this together with another investigator and researcher. And one of the things that they were looking at were ancient maps and ancient records. So she was going to bring that into the next documentary series, which would have been fantastic to have access to that. Together with that, she was working with another amazing researcher and curator, Klaus Donner, who has access to satellite imaging, ground penetration radar technology. So it's not just like GPR or LIDAR, it's like using multiple satellites to have a look beneath like layers and layers and layers of the crust or of the earth. And there was a space near Hawara in Egypt that even during the time of Flinders Petrie at the turn of the 20th century had already raised some flags because there's this ancient labyrinthian structure that was he identified a slab over it. And then anyway, now fast forward to now, Klaus and Dr. Carmen got the GPS coordinates of it just to have have a look. And sure enough, there's definitely a structure, a labyrinthian structure there, and kind of connecting the dots of that too, because a lot of what we know has come out of the Ministry of Antiquities in ancient Egypt is also very much covered up information, or let's say doctored information to suit that narrative of the grandeur of Egypt and keeping people dumbed down, really, keeping people really in the dark about the true heritage of ancient Egypt. And if you watch a documentary, which I highly recommend everybody check it out, it is available on Netflix. And she even has an indigenous Giza wisdom keeper on there who really gives so much information that is unlike what I went to, I guess what you would call classical education of archaeology and history, and it's just not covered. And then if it is, or if that sort of objective look is done, it's kind of extinguished, like hypotheses around that area of any third party interventions as such, and in the technology that we're seeing in ancient Egypt. So the New Atlantis series was going to bring on like that technology with Klaus Donna to have a look at these really bigger pieces that help us bring to date Atlantis investigations, and it would have been great to if we had the chance to show her the rings and show her the rocks, and weave that into, and I'm sure she would have been 100% open to it, weave that into her investigation and into the documentary. So I'll be going into just my work with her, as well as far as the return of the feminine, and bringing and how personally in my journey she really gave me a conscious shift about what's happening in the world, and some of the lies that I personally woke up to, and how it connects to that dumbing down of our collective feminine intelligence being sort of expunged and removed. And it goes way far back. It goes so far back, like from the goddess being erased from ancient Babylon, and you'll see it in the Old Testament. It's been removed, and then you have the Council of Nicaea, where these group of high priests who are satisfying the narrative of the patriarchy at that time, choosing the books that would end up in the Bible as we know it today. So so anyway, that's a little bit about what I want to go into. I don't want to give too much away. Definitely tune in tomorrow. It'll be great to share this and to just honor her memory, and hopefully we can find a way to continue her legacy.
That is incredible. First and foremost, prayers go out to her family, and and to you for keeping that legacy alive. I think it is important. I think you touched on a lot of incredible points right there, especially with the alignment of the masculine and the feminine, and how the feminine was definitely stamped down for a very long time. And I think one of the reasons why we have the discernment we have today is because we're accessing both sides of the masculine and the feminine, which gives us a more robust understanding of what the truth is out there. And I think that the embodiment of that is incredible. The work, so much you could. I am envious the fact that you're an archaeologist. It's always been a dream of mine to do the digging like that, and to be that shovel pusher, and really, get my hands dirty in these ancient civilizations. And I think that the satellites, and having access to the Vatican, but the satellite ground penetrating radar with the satellites itself, it's got to be absolutely epic to see all these different things in a labyrinth. It's incredible. That is incredible stuff. And I look forward to listening, and it's always awesome. Stephen and Evan always put on an amazing conference. I think you're a very welcomed addition to that as well. And I'm glad that we got a chance to meet. And I'm definitely, after you do this, I'm going to have you come back and really lay it down for us, what's coming next, and anything we can do to help too. We're here, research, whatever it is. I believe in what you're doing, and I think that we all have to work together to get to that semblance of what is, or what was, at least, because a lot of it is not available to the main modern man. And I think that a lot of people who are seeking the truth, like yourself, are important to be prominent and to speak those tomes of what was, because now we're moving into this area of humanity where it's important. And I think what you're doing is incredible. So I applaud you, and I can't wait to hear the presentation itself.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So Stephen and Evan, I want to go back to you real quick, because I heard you talk about the stone circle, and you guys did with the stone circle. So I want you to give the audience what that was, what it is, and and I see Omar in the comments. Klaus on it is excellent, and but please give us some of the information that you got from the stone.
Well, that's interesting, because, as I said before, on the presentation we're going to be doing overseas, what I didn't tell Evan is we're going to do that for an hour and a half. Then I'm going to talk about the stone circle. I didn't mention that to him until now. That's why we add. Yeah, what I'm going to do with that is the stone circle that was put up in formation a couple of years ago at Uluru that supplemented the ceremony that took place there. Now, the stones themselves now, about 2 months ago, made it very clear to me they wanted to come back into play, because we were originally going to set them up on Ramangeri land, and we've been blocked twice by the government from doing that. I won't go into the details of that because that'll take up all the time we've got. But they made it clear to me quite recently when I actually set the circles up around here for a group of people who are starting a community school, and they wanted us to welcome the country, which I said I couldn't do, but I could give their children ceremony. And I've never done that before with kids. And as usual, I asked the same thing, which is I don't want to know what happened. But some parents come up and told me, one parent told me what happened to their child after they sat there. And again, I won't go into detail about that now, but it became very obvious to me the rocks were actually ramping up their presence. And a couple of days later, they made it clear to me they wanted to be given, put into formation, and asking people to are coming to our farm. We've had one group that have already come through, and a second group are coming not this week, but next weekend. Now, what I have found out for the first time is because up until now, I've never been allowed to ask people what happens after they sit inside the circle. And I've got to be honest, me with the rocks, to begin with, all I wanted to do to kill me was because I wasn't doing the ceremony correctly. But now that I am, I get nothing. I can sit inside them for a day and I'll get no reaction. So it's very difficult for me when we first put this up, because I said I gave everyone a guarantee. If they got no reaction, they get $50 back for 10 minutes out of the 3.5 hours, and this one's 4, isn't it? Same guarantee applies to the next mob that comes in. Now, why would we do this? Because what it actually does is it makes it obvious, and some people are going to say, oh, they've written comments and they've done the comments. If they write a comment and say they got a reaction, they've done themselves a disservice. They would have got $50 for free. We weren't going to question why they didn't get a reaction, or even if they did or didn't. We just said we'd happily refund straight away if someone didn't get a reaction. This is what's interesting. It's the reactions. We had 33 people who filled out a form, and I'm just going to hold up. This is the form, but it's all scribbled on because this is my record of it. And in it...
You might have to make a nice table.
Well, we might, yeah. There were 3 sections. Was this experience directed towards the mind, body, or soul? And what I asked them to do is give a score from 1 to 10. And then I've got the manner of contact, and it's hair stand on end, vision, voice, telepathic contact, chills and goosebumps, feeling energy waves, and one I wrote in that I couldn't understand was the word heat. And then I've got the type of message. Was it a premonition, a sensation of well-being, wisdom shared, energy inflow charging the body, charging the soul, or charging the mind? So that's what we did, and each person answered it. And what was interesting was of the 33 people who answered this, one person said they got nothing, and the other 32 got amazing reactions. Now, people might think, oh, well, it doesn't work for everyone. It didn't work for her, did it? But here's the point. There were 2 people who came that filled in for 2 other people who probably had COVID and basically said, I'll go instead. They knew nothing about us. We asked everyone to bring gloves because they're going to touch the rocks, but they can't put their skin on it. They didn't bring them. And we sat around the rocks to begin with for a 20-minute session first, where before they do individual meditation, which no one else watches. And within 2 minutes, this same woman insulted my wife. Went over particularly well with me because I'm sitting there biting my tongue thinking there's a few things I like to say, but I better not. And I looked at the rocks and thought, I think we've got a problem here. Further on, that same person insulted Leah, didn't you? Yeah. And further on, that same person, when we had a break, and this is really interesting because where we live, there's signs up everywhere because it's a rainforest. You can't bring dogs or cats in here. There's a sign that says that you can't do it. So in their break, what did they do? They brought their dog to let it run around the farm. So all the way along, I'm not going to say who the person is, I kept thinking, you shouldn't be here. And what was fascinating was the rocks said, I will give them nothing. Give one of these two people nothing. It was one person who was doing all the insulting. Same person each time. The other person did get a reaction. That was important because of the 33 comments, none were the same. But what's fascinating is this. For when it comes to feeling energy waves from the circle, of the 32 that said yes, the scores they gave were a 3 out of 10, 3 gave 6 out of 10, 2 gave 7 out of 10, 3 gave 8 out of 10, 3 gave 9 out of 10, and 20 gave 10 out of 10. Which means everyone there who were actually offered, were given the incentive to say I felt nothing to get the money, actually did themselves a financial disservice by saying we all felt it. Now that was fascinating. What I also found was the commonality is after that, on the manner of contact, feeling energy waves in a circle, 32 out of 33 felt it. The next highest score was heat. And that's the one that threw me. 11 people gave heat a score of 10. Now, these are innate rocks, about 50 or 60 of them. They're sitting inside them, and over 1/3 gave it a score of 10. Didn't expect that. Visions, which got 9 and voice and telepathic content, all those ones got high scores, and some didn't get anything. You've got to remember, some people got one thing, but not another. So that was the first thing I found quite interesting. Secondly, I had people that said, oh, look, I just cried for 10 minutes. Can I write that in? I didn't have a session for that. Another person, energy inflow, charging the body. One person said, I went into the rocks. That's different again. I had some people that just wrote 10 for everything. And one person wrote underneath a comment, there are no words to describe what happened. So the first part of this was that I now know these rocks were reacting, but each person was getting a different reaction. And I found that interesting. And now what I'm doing is I'm compiling all this information. I'm going to write a paper about it. And people will say, you've got no chance. Well, I'm going to say to them that every psychological paper is anecdotal because I ask people for answers. And then you've got to work out whether they're telling the truth. Now, it could be all these people are lying, but remember this, if they are, they're doing themselves a financial disservice in doing that. But the interesting part of this story, Rob, is not all of these people that got different reactions, and they're all powerful reactions, so many 10s. 10s were the highest score for every entry. Every entry, 10 was the highest score.
See, and I was, me and Leah were leading people in and out, so I got to look at their faces as they hopped out, and I'm like, ooh. There's all sorts of things going on.
Because they weren't allowed to tell me the information they got, but I was allowed to ask them how they got it. That's what I was doing this time. But this is where it got interesting. About 3 days later, a lady that didn't know about this, because we've been shadow banned, as you know, and no one knows what we're doing anymore.
Yeah, thank you, Facebook.
Thank you, Facebook. You've been completely shadow banned. She didn't know a thing about this. Yeah, Facebook. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? The world we're stuck in. Anyway, she got in contact with an elder. They rang me, and I said, okay, come down. We'll do a special session for you alone. Now, I knew nothing about this woman. And this is the story that really blew me away. I mean, the others are pretty damn good, don't worry. But this one's quite phenomenal. Anyway, she turned up. Knew nothing about this lady. Never met her before, have I?
I mean, no, you haven't.
You've spoken to her, but I haven't. So I was doing this blind. Anyway, I said, okay, introduced her, sat around the circle. And then I said, okay, I want you to sit inside. I hadn't paid much attention to how she walked around. I normally do, but I didn't see her until she sat down. She said, can I lay? I said, what? She said, oh, I can't possibly sit inside that circle. And I didn't question why. I went and got 5 more cushions so she could lay down there. And I didn't ask because, remember, my job is not to ask. I'm not supposed to get involved in that. But then when she tried to get down in the circle, I'm thinking, hang on, that's not right. She had problems.
Yeah, no. It was
Oh,
hard.
she had major problems, man. And even when she lay down, she couldn't lay her legs down. She said, I can't lay my legs down. So that was sort of upright. And I went back and past her once, and I saw her legs were laying down. I thought, that's different. I thought she couldn't do that. Okay, the 10 minutes were finished, and I came back, and I said, would you mind filling this form out? I said, yeah. She said, but can I tell you about it? I said, I don't want to know anything about what you were told. She said, I don't want to tell you about that because that's not what's important. Then she told me a bit about her life. And she said that she told a partner the day before, I can't live much longer like this. I'm going to have to finish this. It was her back. She was born with a bent back, and she's been in agony. And the agony's got so bad that she was coming to see us as the last option. She told me straight out that she told her yesterday, the day before she came, that she can't do this anymore. The pain is so severe. She told me she's been to chiropractors, she's been to osteopaths, she's been to doctors. They've had her against walls, pushing her spine, trying to straighten, and they couldn't do it. And then she told me what happened. Now, I changed the circle, the rock circle. I made it like I did before with a couple of arrangements. And I did something completely different. I put the alien skull between two silkons, the actual alien skull itself, not the one that's made up, but the real skull, which I'm allowed to do because I'm allowed to keep it within the house, aren't I? And I was within the house, otherwise I go to jail. And I'm not allowed to have a look by any scientist in the world or I'll go to jail. That's a different story. Anyway, she said, I was looking at that skull and I could feel what was happening. She said there was an energy that was going into my back, into the whole of my body. And the first thing it said was, for this to happen, lay your legs down. And she said to him, I can't do that. She said, you can now. And she could straight away. That shocked her. Then she said what happened was, and she was very specific about this, the energy got so great that all of a sudden the whole back straightened and she could hear a clunk. And that was the word she used. And she said, that's what every other expert's been trying to get to straighten my skull, my spine, and they couldn't do it. And this time she wasn't touched by anybody. And then it gets weird because after that, the whole of her body straightened up and she felt completely different. And that's all she wanted to talk about, didn't she, Evan? We couldn't get past it. She kept saying the same thing. Look at my legs right now. They're straight. I can't believe it. She said, my back is straight. I can't feel pain. I haven't felt like this forever. Now, what the cynic's going to say, Rob, because believe me, they're out there in their billions at the moment, they're going to say, okay, maybe that happened, but maybe it was just through mind control and through believing and wanting to be healed. Okay? I know how they think, and I'm sure you would agree that's what they're going to say. We got a text back from her yesterday, didn't we?
Yes.
And Evan, if you can find it, I want Evan to read what she wrote to us. We didn't write to her, by the way. I want to make this point. We didn't ask her, how are you, or anything like that. This was sent to us 4 days after she laid inside innate objects, which are called rocks, that have no energy within them, apparently. And she said it clunked her back and made her stand up properly. And she said, for the first time in her life, my back is straight. But the question is, what about the next day and the day after? Surely after, say, 2 or 3 days, if that was psychosomatic, if that was done by pure mind alone, mind will alone, it's going to have to wear out because the spine is not right. And it's got to the stage where she was about to end her life. And she's only just 40, if that. Have you got it?
Yeah. I've got bits here.
I'll just read the last.
Heat in my hips. And then she said she could actually smell something when she was lying in the circle. Yeah. Something was burning.
Mm-hmm.
Cannot thank you enough for guiding me today. My back is much better. I'm so grateful. And then that was just afterwards. And then she said, yep, she's going to get out and walk more. But my God, my back is straight.
That's the one that came about 4 days later. My God, my back is still straight. That's 4 days after the event. Now she's going to go walking. She couldn't do that before.
What happened is just beyond any normal explanation.
That's incredible. That's incredible. You guys are not only helping people, but Stone kind of said it in the comments, and I think that those rocks, when put together in the right formation, create that portal, and that
But
portal it gives us access to energies, whether it be from the Great Mother, or the Earth, or through the veil, and some sort of energy comes through it, and it's giving people that heat. That's that exchange of energy. It's a friction when two energies rub together. It kind of creates that heat, right? And then also, what it did is it engulfed her. And when people go on ground, Mother Earth is healing them. It's
that's
relieving
what
stresses.
it is, yeah. And this is important. You've got it in mind, mate. What it's doing. And it's interesting because, like I said, I was just looking at the different scores here, and we've got 16 out of 30, 33, 32 people who had a vision of some form. 14 out of 33, or 32, because one didn't do it, had heard voices, and we've got telepathic contact. What's happening here? Because this woman, her major issue wasn't her psychic development, it was her body. Her body was getting to the stage where she wasn't going to be here anymore. And straight away, I know this sounds bizarre, and it doesn't. What I will be doing from now on is the skull goes in there after seeing that. Because when I saw her, when I started to see how she was moving, and when she tried to get down, man, it took a long time for her to get down onto those 6 cushions, and it was really difficult, and she could not straighten herself. This was just not possible. So we're looking at something there where the skull and the bones said together, okay, this woman, what she needs is we've got a back to work on. We're going to straighten her back so she can go for a walk again. Or so she can write 5 days later, my God, my back is still straight. Because I guarantee that she must have occasionally had doubts and thinking, how's this possible? Like she said, this just isn't possible. Now, what we are doing, by the way, with that is, I know a lot of the people, particularly when we're talking to your mob, Rob, are not from Australia and can't get to the farm. And because we're going to do this every month leading up to December until the end, because after that it doesn't matter. The rocks want, what they've said to me is they will reach each person who deserves to be reached. And the beauty of this is if you don't deserve it, they won't give it to you. They will give you nothing because you don't deserve it. You're too busy insulting me, insulting Leah, insulting my wife. And those rocks would have known all of that. Don't you worry. And they would have said, no, for you, my dear, nothing. Just sit here for 10 minutes. We won't kill you. Because I don't worry. They have done that to people, haven't they, Evan?
Yeah.
People have done the wrong thing when they've sat inside the rocks and touched the rocks, and things have happened that aren't good. But that's a different story. None of these people do that because what happens is they sit for 10 minutes and either Evan or Leah sits a distance away from everyone else, and they have their 10 minutes alone. But we are going to film it, and we're going to put that up. We're going to put that up overseas. We won't be charging the same amount, of course, because it's going to be slightly different. It's not the same as sitting between them. But we are going to put the camera inside the rocks for 10 minutes at the finish, and they're going to go through all the workshops and all the other stuff that's going on. And we do know, we've done this once before with the second solstice, and we left the camera inside, and quite a few people got a reaction. So we're going to try that anyway. But if you're in Australia, I would recommend, and I can tell you the 32 people that actually did get a reaction there, none of them complained, and everyone said it was amazing. And what they are doing is they're preparing people for the change. That's what they want to do. That's what their job is. Yeah,
Absolutely. I watched the Stone Circle when we did the solstice event, and we had that half-hour ceremony beforehand, and it was effective for sure. And I got a lot of different things. It was I was like I was being talked to from the other side, or the higher entities. And I wanted to jump back to TJ real quick, and her being the archaeologist now, hearing what these stones do. One more thing I wanted to add before we go to TJ is when you put that skull into that center or between those rocks, I bet you that it draws a specific frequency or specific vibration than if it wasn't there. You know what I mean? It kind of draws one vibration up as opposed to the other. But TJ, you're muted, so unmute and tell us now, that you've been around some of hearing what they're saying, how, being the archaeologist, what do you see happening there, or what do you kind of like, give us your take on it. I don't know, we can't hear you for some reason, TJ. I'm not sure. No, try unmuting one more time. See what happens. No, that's weird. Maybe try jumping out and coming back into the stream. Sometimes it happens. Sorry about that. It gets a little funny sometimes, but just to kick back to that skull has a key. It's like the key, and the center. Oh, let's just say the center of the portal is like a lock. That skull is drawing a specific doorway open to a specific frequency, and I bet you with different artifacts in the center of that circle, you will activate different aspects of whatever frequencies need to come through for that object. You guys are muted now too.
Oh.
There you go.
All right, it's funny because the day after we did this, we had a phone call from a friend of Evan's, who's also a psychic, and specifically the phone call was about the skull. Now, she didn't know what we'd done, did she, Evan?
No.
And she said basically what she was saying was the skull wants to remain within the circle, which was interesting because at that stage we hadn't told her we put it in there. So that was the skull reconfirming that. And yet, it makes sense to me because we didn't put, mind you, the circle worked perfectly without the skull in, but it's going to work even better for the next mob. What needs to be factored in there is, according to Mesref, that particular skull, and maybe TJ's back in a sec, so I'll finish this quickly and you can get back to TJ again. He said this about that skull. He said that belongs to a race of beings that we only know about. They are so ancient. They are basically the first of all of them, the first life form after the creation, and their wisdom exceeds all of the others. And it came to this earth actually to help heal it, and I think it had that potential within it. And I think that's why because it came here to heal the planet, and this woman lays there in agony, and it does exactly the same thing it was doing to the planet. So go back to TJ now, because I think I heard noise there, so we might be able to get her.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm using my phone. I don't know what happened with the laptop. Yeah, so what I would say is here's kind of some of the I guess the real world problems that you encounter when you do these kind of investigations onto what I would call really a lost spiritual and energetic human technology, if that makes some sense. Probably insert the word earth energy there too, because one thing that we encountered when I was doing the research and field work for our documentary Ancient Tomorrow, where we were really our ambition was to like be able to go through all the megalithic sites all over the world, specifically as many pyramids as we could from the ancient past that we know of, and really have a look at what was the hidden or what was the advanced technology that they would have used, especially knowing that pyramidic structures have the potential to amplify earth energy. And there's various authors who and researchers who have done investigations and work in this. And Russia in particular has Dr. Valery Uvarov, whom actually Dr. Carmen Bolter was going to work with, who uses a special kind of electrophotonic a sophisticated electrophotonic imaging technology that kind of takes, it's almost like Kirlian photography. It kind of takes quantitative data using a special camera, and also connections through just the fingertips of the person, looking at their energy fields, and also their resonance field, going in and out of pyramids. And to me, I would take that as, it's not just the pyramid structure, but it's also the rock material. And the rock materials always contain silica. They always, and the rocks that Stephen is talking about are a chert rock material with silica compounds in it, right? So there's always some crystal in it. And it seems that where you have these mystical stones, and by the way, I was on a particular site in Southern California that had the very, very similar situation happening with anomalous, highly worked on, super hard on the hardness scale, granitic stones, right, that just don't make sense. They're anomalous. They're actually like jello molds. They were called cog stones from Southern California. You might have heard of them. And to this day, you know, like many people have hypotheses, but it's unknown what they were used for, especially during a time when the accompanying technology was flake stone tools. Okay, and then you have these highly worked on cog shaped stones and jello mold stones, and a cache of them, a whole cache like we found in a burial site. But anyway, they're granitic too. And they were actually referred to by the Tongva and the Wanenyo tribes as magico religious objects. And to me, it's I would love to do this. This is the problem I was saying. I would love to do this kind of quantitative empirical studies. And this was what Carmen taught me. And Carmen was a proponent of, is that there's a way to collect data for this. If we could get that technology in that stone circle, together with, you know, it'd be great to have a collective effort to see who else is doing this kind of similar data collecting technology, whether it be electromagnetic fields or earth resonance, even gathering a baseline on the resonance of the earth frequency at that time and before and after, that sort of thing. That's the kind of empirical studies and work that we could do. So that's where my mind would go. And here's the conundrum: when you're an archaeologist doing this kind of independent study and work that falls in the fringes, it's going to be very hard to to kind of get funding or even to get access to sites, because this is the kind of thing that you should do at every megalithic site. And we have had, if you watch the Pyramid Code, his name escapes me at the moment, but one of the episodes is particularly looking at photography taken at the tips of some of the pyramids in ancient Egypt, and the amount of orbs that they noticed appear, as well as I think they used EMF readers, and just kind of getting that sort of data. But what's great is to get data on the humans, the people that go inside and outside, whether it be any kind of structure with these materials, with these objects. And here's the thing: a question I would ask is, so we know crystal can have the capacity to store memory, quartz crystal, right? It's used in modern day technology for that very reason. And also it is a transductive material, so it can carry energy and transduce it, or electrical current, right? But what makes it discriminate between, well, why don't these rocks just carry memory of all sorts from all time? but instead specifically what we're witnessing, and that's just a projection of something from those rocks, I guess I would say. So, so there's some questions that could really be asked. Is like, okay, so how could you really study this? I mean, there's a way. If we all put our heads together, I'm sure we could find ways. But like the connection between the rock material, like really geologically looking at that, as well as its cultural relevance, being those etched and worked on stones, and where their provenience was when they were first found, or how they have come to be known, and what they might have been associated with from their past owners, as well as the person affected. And I would be looking at their nervous system. It would be great to see if you could, I mean, get readings of their brain waves during the time. So that sort of thing would be great to do, just because I think it helps give us more of a multifaceted or multidisciplinary approach to quantifying some of the data that you could collect. But then beyond that, if we look at what has been told from indigenous cultures about these, like I said, magico religious charmed objects, there's also a lot of secrecy around them and behind them, or you have to be a certain level of initiate to be privy to what's really going on with them, and some of them, I mean, they're referred to as cursed objects, or if you're not the right person to witness its power, then you're cursed, or you just don't get it, like what Stephen was saying. They're not going to give you anything. And then beyond that, and this is work that Carmen was looking into, is like, back in the distant past, humans had access to more, let's call them, senses, heightened states of awareness. And perhaps that's what it's activating at a time right now of the quickening and activation of our higher states of awareness, because more and more of us are really awakening due to the veils being lifted, and we're in an apocalyptic time in the sense of conscious shifts. So, but nevertheless, it's calling us to, which is a theme of Stephen and Evan's work, going back to old ways and tuning in. And some of this is just, you can't be instructed what to do, like what Stephen said. You have to just experience it, interpret your experience. And I would say call on your guides. I'm quite a spiritual person, and I believe we're multidimensional light beings. We can't just expect that we know everything through our five senses. We already know that we don't see everything within beyond the visible light spectrum. So there's a lot that is happening that's unseen and beyond the five senses. So anyway, I think it's fascinating to think about and to ponder, like, look, how could we study this further? And I think it also gives us a clue what the ancient pyramid builders, ancient megalithic builders, what level of technology they had. So, and
I
how
agree
they
with you.
achieved what they did with these places that they built.
It's wild. And, we're on the same wavelength too, because the first thing I thought of was an EMF meter. Even though it's, a lot of people with the paranormal, like if you get an EMF meter in there and take it in and out of the circle, place different objects in, check the EMF, see if the spikes are, I think, but there's also further you can go with which frequencies are being heightened at what times. But I absolutely agree with you. I think that the quantifiable data would be just, I'm sure, everything's being worked on, but I know Stephen and Evan, their work, there it is. See, I'm sure that they've done it as well. So it's wild how we're all in the same wavelength. And I just think it's an incredible time, and seeing all these things start to happen in different ways that we weren't used to before, and this symbiosis and getting back to that one-on-one relationship with the planet and each other is kind of like this this move in the right direction. And these objects, again, give us those glimpses that we need to kind of adjust ourselves and realign ourselves to be focused on what the next steps are. So I'll give it back to Stephen and Evan. You guys are muted, just so you know. There you go.
Actually, yeah, I like that idea. Thank you, TJ. Evan just went and got our EMF machine because there was a time when the rocks were first turned on. We had 3 of them where the needle was going off the scale all the time. The very first time the rocks were turned on, we had 3 of them working then, and the rocks were reacting. They haven't done that since then, but then we haven't measured them since then. We certainly haven't measured the circles.
Well, we haven't. I've just run it over the rocks, but we've not run it over while there's someone in there.
No, because the rocks are, what we've learned about the rocks, if you were to just put the rock on the ground, with the exception of 1 or 2 of them, they don't do anything because they're symbiotic. They feed off the energy of humans. It's an interaction between rock and host. Most of these rocks are meant to be like that. They're meant to be held or put in formation. So we've never done a measurement, but we will be. And I also thought seriously of maybe it might be interesting to take a photograph of the person as they're in this thing and as they're walking out to see what sort of reaction happens there. But we'll ask people if they're up to that, because photographs often pick up things we can't see. That's what happened at Uluru when the rocket, when the Uluru exploded. It's 7:36. Even the people who filmed it didn't see it. So it could be that sort of energy again. So they're both great ideas, and I'm going to see if we can. Well, definitely the EMF we will use, and the other one too. So this has been worthwhile for us. Thank you, TJ. Very good, because I'm trying to do this on an empirical level as much as possible. But the EMF machine and a photograph.
It'd be great to find an open-minded doctor to come and take, blood pressure readings and all sorts of things.
Yeah, well, look, let's just get real, okay? We'll do the things we know can happen. And when it comes to that, that's going.
I would add definitely take photography of like north, south, east, and west of your orientation before, during, and after, and voice recording.
Yeah,
and
we'll do
play that back and listen to it with headphones. And you can get Marco and my husband Marco and I involved, because we've done a little bit of just amateur paranormal research and captured some stuff, on recording, on voice record, on audio recording, and that covers sound, that covers light, the visible light spectrum. So it's just kind of covering all those bases and getting a baseline before and after. If you want to take photography and get clearance from the people who are participating.
Yeah, we got to get clearance first, but that shouldn't be too hard, because everyone's coming to be part of the experience with the rocks, and that adds to it. So I don't think it'll be an issue, because we sort of make sure when they meditate for their 10 minutes they're left alone, but we can photograph them as they go in and when they come out, can't we? And leave them alone.
Apps too. There's apps that measure infrared. Or there's infrared sensors you can use, this because you kept getting heat and you weren't expecting heat, so you can actually check to see if the heat actually goes up or if it's just a sensation of what they're feeling.
Yeah, because that was a surprise. I didn't expect. I had 11 on 10 for heat, and I couldn't even. Well, when I wrote it in, I asked myself, why the hell am I putting it in there? I couldn't even see the point of it. It turned out it was the second highest score. So yeah, look, that's a great idea. I'm inspired by what you've both said about different ways we can empirically measure it, because that's what I've always tried to do. I mean, I believe the way I've set it out from a score sheet is effective, because I can then quantify that and give percentages and stuff like that, which is what scientists crave, as we know, TJ. They love figures. So we give them figures en masse, but I like the idea of trying to seek out noise, seek out waves of energy, and by using the EMF machine and the camera and something for audio, I think it's a great idea. I'm quite excited by that. Yeah,
I think you're going to get a lot of action. I really do. I just, I know TJ said it, and I feel it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy.
Well, I know it's crazy because I'm looking at the figures here, and I know that everyone. In fact, it was interesting because of the 32 that actually responded. There were 2 people that got scores of 3 and 4 and 2, And one of them wrote down underneath, I still have to learn how to relax. It was fairly obvious they would have been given that lesson. So if you take those ones away that were sort of like, and I'm going to try when I talk to people next time, for those who have got some doubts, because some will go in, to try and remove those doubts before they go in so they leave themselves more open to the experience. Now I know I've got something to rely on, which is facts. Because unfortunately, to an extent like TJ, I came into this deal to begin with as a scientist. In fact, I deliberately, in our first 3 books, we never wrote anything esoteric, did we, Evan?
No.
We're published by University Press of America. And when we tried to, in our 4th book, we mentioned the word Blavatsky. And they went ballistic. They said, you cannot use that woman's name
I
in
don't
there.
think they also liked us using Professor Elkin either.
Oh, no, they said we couldn't use Elkin or Blavatsky. And then we realised if you even touch the empirical in academia, if you touch the mystical in academia, they go ballistic. Man, they really get quite stroppy about it. They said I think they said we could mention Elkin with a 2-page disclaimer, didn't they?
At the start of the book.
At the start of it, we had to write a 2-page disclaimer saying he's a load of shit, and then we can mention him. That was the only way they agreed to it. And then we decided we're not writing with you anymore. But yeah, great idea. I'll do that for sure. And we'll see how that runs together. I do intend to continue doing the survey, but we can add to it now. And I'm going to write a series of articles about this as it goes along too. So yeah, good idea. Right, so that's what our next online conference is going to be about. Thank you, TJ, for sharing that with us. And we'll finish, as I said before, with a chat with Mesref and about Lemuria, because I think it's very important that we do both sides of the equation. It's interesting because Mesref said about something about Lemuria, I think sums up the difference and makes it nearly impossible for mainstream archaeology to do Lemuria. He referred to Lemuria as being the wand, didn't he, Evan?
Mm.
He said it was the spiritual wand of the planet. Now, this is where magic powered at its highest level. He also said that people were allowed to visit Lemuria, but they were never welcome to stay. It was kept separate from what was going on everywhere else. And it was interesting too, because we found out from Leah that for a while Atlanteans did go to Lemuria. Then all of a sudden something happened. And in all their records, all they would say is nobody goes there. And they never gave a reason why, did they?
No.
Nothing. All they said was, you don't go there anymore. We did before, but we don't anymore. And some people think that separation from Lemuria and Atlantis was the pivotal part of the downfall of Atlantis, because they didn't go to that place where, I think to an extent, it was a bit like Mecca, a place you were allowed to visit. He said you were allowed to visit, but you couldn't stay. So I've got a suspicion it was like that, and it may well have been the spiritual center of the planet. But something happened, and we don't know what that is yet, do we?
No.
But we'll try and ask.
I think we're on the cusp of it, though. I'll tell you that. I think we're on the cusp of figuring it out, and I can't wait for you guys to come back and tell us about all of the stats and the figures and the data that you got from looking at all those ideas. I think it's going to be just off the chart. So we're gonna round up for everybody to give their final statements. We're gonna shut this bad boy down and let you guys get some, good rest. And it's nighttime over here, but I know for you guys it's the daytime. But for everybody to get rest so they're fresh for tomorrow night. And this has been epic, and there's so much to sit on and talk about from this point. So I'll start with TJ, and then we'll go to you guys, and then we'll be done for the night.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Sure can.
You can hear me? All right, awesome. Yeah, so just final words. I would just say, if you haven't already, definitely check out the late Dr. Carmen Bolter's The Pyramid Code. I just want to really emphasize the importance of her work, especially if you're a person right now who's, really coming or journeying through some of the conscious awakenings that many in our collective are experiencing, because there's a lot there that might help make sense of things, or maybe connect more dots for you. And not in a way that it's, you know, a conspiracy and like a another deep rabbit hole to get lost into, but more like a remembering of something really intrinsic within everyone, starting with that kind of the way that society and culture for so many generations have endured the trauma and the dumbing down and the marginalization of the feminine intelligence. um, and I think when you see that, how the what the possibilities were for matriarchal cultures in the ancient past, and how potentially that was mainstream. And I don't mean women overpowering men. I mean within every male or female, a balance of both sides. You know, both our inner god and goddess divinity. It can be really helpful, especially for those who are looking for some kind of way to navigate the what's coming in the future for the world. There's so much uncertainty and suffering and stress right now, after especially what we've been through with the pandemic and lockdowns and displacement and just confusion and everything that they're even talking about now in Davos in Switzerland about how the world should be, you know, as dictated by oligarchs. It can be a really confusing time, and this might be a way to kind of reset your soul's compass, if that makes sense. So I invite you guys to all watch on tomorrow at the conference. And when you have time, if you haven't yet, check out the late, great Dr. Carmen Bolter's The Pyramid Code, which should be available on Netflix and on YouTube, I believe, on stream. Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
Thank you, TJ. Absolutely incredible. And guys, to see more of TJ's work, below this clip or this video is her Linktree, so you can find all of the work that she does, all the websites that she's affiliated with, from Instagram to a personal website. And go follow her at every aspect. TJ, keep doing the work you're doing. I look forward to actually having a one-on-one with you and really getting down to the roots of what brought you to that step in your life to be an archaeologist, and from this point forward. So I look forward to that. And yeah, let's pass it over to Stephen and Evan.
Just thought the best way to finish this up is to just show people some of the rocks that will be involved in this ceremony. And when I hold them up, I'll just turn them around to show you something with each one. You can see this one's got different markings on it. But what's really interesting, this particular rock was looked at by a geologist, and he said he's never seen a core sample of this fine degree. And there's a perfect circle. He's never seen anything like it. What you'll see when I hold these rocks up, each one of them, they're all different from each other. The one I'm going to hold up next has been coated, and you can see the rock underneath. You can see that that's the rock underneath is a different color, but when you look on the side there, you see that mark there. That's been melted a second time from the top. Your finger goes on the top like this, and it run down the side, and this side wasn't melted. These rocks were melted and put onto this. Now, the technology on each of these rocks is amazing for different reasons. This particular one's got cut marks running across both sides. Again, it's coated. Now, the technology breaks all the rules that there are. When I talk about coats, here's a different coat. You can see a coat that's been put on top of the marking underneath there. And the base rocks underneath there again has been cut. The coat's been put on. A second coat's been put on. All of the stuff I'm showing you right now shows you technology. This one's been cut and cut so many times. And each of the lines that's been cut with is actually perfectly straight. All of these rocks I've shown you from a technological viewpoint don't belong to this country. But you know what? It's secondary to the magic inside them. They were sacred rocks like TJ was talking about before in America. Sacred rocks that were used for magic. And guess what? The magic's coming back. And that's what this is all about. Our online conferences finish in December of this year, because after that, it's over. If you want to be part of the future, if you want to get on to one of the right road the Mayans talk about, if the fast-flowing river that the Hopi talk about, there's a sign-on date. And it's running out. So, ladies and gentlemen, come along to our workshop and find out more about the sign-on date. Now you can make sure you're part of it, because that's what this is all about now. The change is coming, and it's up to you guys to work out where you want to be. So, yeah, come and join us. We'll be there soon enough.
I'll just add, come see how I've hijacked the content of the conference.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah. And
I'm
come
not
see...
gonna- I'm not going to lie. When you were showing those rocks out, I started to sweat a little bit. I don't know why, but I felt heat too. It was actually kind of wild. You see my head's glistening already. And I've been sitting in this chair for a while. The light's not hot. So there's something going on with that rock. I could also feel the energy coming off the rocks as you were pulling each one up. And it was just something a little bit different. It was insane. It was insane. But, you know, thank you both. I've put in the comments, ouralienancestry.net. As you can see, we've got it here. Yeah. So go and get your tickets if you haven't already. Also, you can find it underneath. You can find Forgotten Origins, which will lead you there, and also Our Alien Ancestry, which is underneath this video. So everybody go and purchase your ticket. I promise you that it will be so worth it that you'll be back every month until December, obviously. But also you can join Stephen and Evans on Forgotten Origins. You can join the collective, and then you'll be able to see all the backtrack ones too, right? So go and catch up to what we're doing, because it's important. Like they said, there is this great split that is coming. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're on the right side of it. So grab all the tools and grab all the information that you can get right now before we get to that point. So with that being said, thank you, TJ. Thank you, Stephen and Evan. It's been an absolute pleasure. Love talking with you guys. We're going to have you back after the next ceremony next month. So guys, be prepared, because we're going to go in again. We're going to get that data, and we're going to show the world what's really going on in Australia.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
As always, we appreciate it. Big time.
Love all of you. And TJ, welcome to the collective. I'm so glad to have met you. It's going to be, we're going to be working hard from this point out. So everybody get ready. But thank you, everybody, for coming around tonight. Thank you for listening. Share, like, subscribe, do all the good stuff, because we need help. The thought police are out there, and we're going to beat them all day, every day. With that being said, my name is Rob Yox. That's TJ, Stephen, and Evan, and we are out of here.